everybody. I believe we are now live on YouTube where we are recording the class. This is the second class in our course for all humankind, and we are showing a PowerPoint as well, and we're having a fantastic time. Anyway, good morning, everybody. I do want to start today's class by dedicating the class in memory of Batya. Blessed memory, a member of our group for many years who passed away last week. And we'll always remember Batya for her spunk and her chutzpah, as I spoke about her funeral on Monday, or was it Tuesday or Monday? But anyway, and obviously Batya will live on in our memories. And we should all be inspired to do good. But one of the things that people were talking about and we saw is how she treated everybody with incredible dignity. And that's something that's a very special thing in and of itself. And so that's one thing to talk about specifically.
What is Bach's last name?
Ben David, Batya Ben David.
That's her Hebrew name. What's
The
her
last name was Ben David.
Oh, that's her real. That's
Yeah,
her
but
English.
Thanked her or something at one point. Ben David.
Husband changed, so then she took it.
Okay, amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of today's class is for all humankind, and lesson 2 talks about is morality obvious, and that's the topic. And really, to give you an overview on what the class is about, in the front of the lesson, in the books on lesson 2, on page 45, it says, is morality obvious? Can logic create morality? Explore the value of innate human dignity, where it comes from, and the trouble with pinning new sources to a timeless moral principle. So what we're going to say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get right out with it and tell you what we're going to say. What we're going to say in this class is that absolute morality in an absolute has to come from God. Because if people start making it up, if it's all based on human reason, it can go in all kinds of directions. Now, that's the central thesis of this class, but it's really not the main point of the class. The central thesis is really not the main point. The main point of the class is to speak about the next 2 of the 7 Noahide laws. And today we're going to talk about 3 of them. Don't murder, don't steal, and don't be cruel to animals. So the next 3 of the 7 Noahide laws. Don't murder, don't steal, and don't be cruel to animals. And so that's the main goal, is to talk about these 3 things. There's a philosophical part of the class, which is to bring out this idea that morality has to be rooted in God. That's the general thesis of the class. Can you hear me, Elizabeth? Should I speak louder? Should I yell? Should I scream?
I like this.
I don't think I've ever heard you yell or scream.
That's not your style.
You've never heard me yell or scream?
No.
Hang around. I yell and scream sometimes. I think it's embarrassing when I do it, but I do it just like everybody else. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see people here together. Okay. So the topic is morality obvious? Lesson 1, we started talking about the 7 laws. I'm just going to move this around like this. I don't know why it floats to the middle of the screen. There you go, Jerry. You're in the corner. You didn't know you were in the corner, but you're in the corner. Must have been a very naughty boy. Okay. The 7 Noahide laws, ladies and gentlemen, was what we started a bit last week. And we spoke about the idea that Jews are entrusted with the task of teaching them. And the first 2 laws set the stage for a tranquil society. The first one being the idea that there is a God, not to worship idols. It's the first of the 7 of our laws, and the second is not to curse God. And we said that the understanding that there's a God creates a framework by which all of society can exist. So that's point number 1. certainly not worshipping idols. When you worship idols, then the world becomes a chaotic world in which all kinds of different things can happen. We also spoke about cursing God leads to a lack of, it underlies an incredible lack of appreciation that for God, for all the blessings in our lives. So, and gratitude being part of the foundation of a normal society. That's all in lesson 1. If you want a review of lesson 1, ladies and gentlemen, it is on YouTube. You can find it on the Abide with Kaylin website. And you can call me for it later. Let me just answer this in 1 second. Menachem, good morning. I'm in a JLR class. Can I call you back in about an hour and a half? Okay, fantastic. But when the kids call from South Africa, you answer.
Yes, yes. And
Okay, what are we up to over here? Stop share for a second. I got to get the other thing back on the screen. Share. Yeah. Okay. So the first 2 laws set the stage for a tranquil society. Now, today we're going to analyze different reasons why people might keep these laws. Because it's a command from God, makes you pious, wise, gives you a share in the world to come. On the other side, there's an option that it's sensible. I would actually move wise from this column to the right column, perhaps. But, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Please turn to page 47 in your books, where you will see a fascinating text from the Rambam. Now, we have to remember who the Rambam was. The Rambam, Maimonides, was one of the greatest halachists and philosophers who ever lived. And he was born in Spain. He lived most of his life in Egypt. So after fleeing from Spain, and Maimonides is known as a great rationalist. He obviously believed in God, but he explains everything rationally. In other words, he appreciated the human mind. And historians and philosophers always read the Rambam in the context of rationalism, that things have to make sense logically to the Rambam. But the Rambam, the great rationalist, also understood that there's a God. In other words, his reason led him to believe that there is a God, and that we don't understand everything God wants us to do, because God is a heck of a lot smarter than we are. And God, right? So there are things we don't necessarily understand. But we should try to use our minds to understand as much as possible. Now, that is very important in terms of reading this next text. Page 47. Turn off the sound, Mr. I don't know why. I always have my sound off, except today for some reason. A pious Gentile. So this is in the laws where Maimonides is describing at the end of his code of Jewish law. I mentioned last week. He has 2 chapters talking about the 7 Noahide laws. And in that section, he writes like this. A pious Gentile is defined as one who commits to following the 7 mitzvahs and is meticulous in their observance. And they do so because they recognize that they are God's commandments to the descendants of Noah. In other words, why do they do it? They do it because they recognize they are pious. They are pious when they recognize that these are God's commandments to the descendants of Noah, as subsequently written in the Torah and relayed by Moses. A pious Gentile has a share in the world to come. Now Maimonides is a fascinating statement. If, however, a Gentile observes these laws simply because they are sensible and dictated by logic, they do not have the status of a resident foreigner and are not reckoned among the pious Gentiles, but rather from the wise ones. In other words, if your system of morality is based on logic, you might be a very wise man, but you're not pious,
Oh,
says Maimonides. In other words, without God, you're not pious. It's a fascinating statement, in my opinion. Fascinating statement, maybe the most interesting thing in the whole course.
how about if a Jew has this issue?
Pardon?
What if a Jew people are always asking me, about, why is this in the thing? It makes no sense. And, they're looking for sense. And
Right,
logic.
so people are looking for logic. And the
Yeah.
fascinating thing is that Maimonides, who's the great rationalist, he's the one who says that rationalism is not enough. That's what's so fascinating about this text.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Hmm,
the limits of where it starts and where it ends.
right.
And we know that Judaism, God values actions more than anything else. There's a famous expression in the Talmud, which is important in this discussion as well. There's a famous expression in the Talmud about a thief who, before they go to rob someone, they pray for success. And in the irony of it is, if they're praying to God, why are they stealing? And if they're stealing, why are they praying to God? Right? The person who prays to God shouldn't be stealing. And obviously in Hollywood, they love the scene. That's why in many of the mafia movies, they have the mafia going to church.
Right.
Right? They do that on purpose, to show the irony of the situation.
Hmm,
So ironically, right? And you do have this dynamic in Judaism that you have people that believe in God, because the obvious idea is that we're all that thief.
They're all what?
We are all that thief.
Yeah.
Oh, that thing.
At some level or another. We all know, we all do things we know we shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And we ask God for success in our ways that aren't always perfect. So, and it comes, Chassidus explains at great length, it comes from the fact that the belief in God could be more abstract and not internalized into
Yeah.
every element of our character. And it's a big important part of our lives to try to integrate our belief into our character. So I say that because that's almost the flip side of this particular discussion, where you have a person who is perfectly pious in all their actions, but because we're saying they don't attribute it to God, they're not pious, says Maimonides. Now we all know that actions are more important than beliefs in Judaism, although beliefs are very important. And so you got to bring it all together. We can't say that the person who believes in God but doesn't behave properly is better than the one who behaves well but doesn't believe in God. So the point in saying I'm bringing extremes out. These are all extreme positions, because we're going to be having a conversation today about morality. And we talk about it in the extremes to highlight the differences, and sometimes when you take something to its ultimate extreme, it shows the fallacy of the argument. So the fallacy of the argument to say that it is a little ridiculous to say that somebody who behaved absolutely piously their whole life, but wasn't necessarily sure about God, is not pious. It's also not right. So we have to put it all together. So I don't know the exact things, but that is what the Rambam says over here. He doesn't say it in exactly those words. He says if they do it simply because they are sensible and dictated by logic, they do not have the status of a resident foreigner and are not. In other words, he ties it in with a resident foreigner, which is somebody who is accepting. A resident foreigner means that they are living in Israel and accepting Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. So it might be connected to that. There's a lot we can talk about. I don't want to spend the whole day analyzing this Rambam, but it is certainly a very interesting text. But it brings up this issue of what gives ethics its authority, right? What gives ethics its authority? And they're generally considered today, and we have tables about this. So there's a if you look on page 51, I don't want to do 51 yet. No, page 52 in our books. Alternative foundations of morality to God, to Judaism, to Torah. Proposed moral foundation. So if it's sometimes logic or reason, in other words, it makes sense. if morality is based on what makes sense, that's one way of looking at it. Another way,
That's all subjective.
but I mean, it could be subjective, or it could be,
Cause like in Germany, World War II, it made sense to do what they did. to
well, it
them.
could be, that's a potential weakness in that system.
Right.
If morality is based on conscience, some people will say that their conscience doesn't allow, but the problem is the conscience is something that can go in all different directions. Or is it based on society and societal norms? And that's itself, those fluctuate. And then there's obviously another approach, which is that morality is based on God. And that's the one you might be shocked to hear this, ladies and gentlemen. But the approach that we're going to take in this class is that morality is based on God. We're proponents of that notion. That's where we're coming from in this class. So that is the general philosophical structure. Okay, let's watch a video. Guess what? Guess what I can do? I have this little box over here, and I'm going to make it louder. I'm going to put it up here. I figured I'd get.
Wow.
Let's see how this works. If it works.
Mommy, I want a cookie. Can I take one?
Can you hear it at home?
It's not for dinner.
Yeah.
1 second. Can you hear it at home? You can, right?
Yes.
Got that. Now, it might be too loud in the room for a second. Let me see, because I adjusted the channels up.
I guess it works.
Mommy, I want a cookie. Can I take one?
No, we'll all have some after dinner
Why can I have cookies right
because those cookies aren't yours and we all live together, so we have to be fair.
Why not be fair? Why can't it just be mine? I'm hungry.
Because people would get upset. Wouldn't you be upset if Ben or Sarah ate any cookies?
Yes, I'll literally cry.
We don't get people upset for no reason, do we?
Well, there is a good reason. Like eating a cookie is a good reason.
It's just wrong.
Why is it wrong?
Because it just is.
That's not an answer. Why?
Okay, let's try this again. People matter, so their feelings matter.
Why do people matter?
People matter because they're human beings.
Says who? If I don't agree that people matter, can I take the cookie?
No,
Why not?
I said so.
because I said so.
There we go.
Okay, fine. You want a real answer? It's because then nothing works anymore. If people don't matter, then fairness doesn't matter. Rules don't matter. Then the whole idea of mine and yours falls apart.
So it's not a real rule. It's just to make things work.
Asking why about everything can be fun, but at a certain point, you need to accept some rules, even if we can't prove them.
Like what?
Like that people matter, that hurting someone needs a good reason, and that you can't just decide that fairness doesn't count.
So it's like the rules before the rule.
Exactly.
But wait, who makes those rules?
What do you think, ladies and gentlemen?
That's really cool.
Hmm?
Well, I think he's a good kid to ask for a cookie, not just take the cookie.
He's a nice little boy. He's a nice little boy. I agree.
Curiosity is very important.
He's a great kid. Great kid. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen. So one approach to morality is that it comes from a perspective of logical. It's logical. Makes sense. And by the way, it is logical. In fact, Maimonides says a person could be wise. It is logical that we need to have societal rules. And there are humanists out there that believe that and do take a logical approach on the whole issue, and they're not wrong. But the problem is if there are rotten moral premises, when things get grey, when things get complicated, so then you use your logic, you can end up with catastrophic conclusions. So, for example, a classic example of this is Nazi Germany, where they thought that they came up with a philosophical construct that society and people's contribution to society was the source of morality, having the best society possible. And in a society like that, people with special needs, right, with handicaps or special become a drain on society, so they killed them all. And obviously that's just wrong. But if it's all for the betterment of society, they argued, well, these people are contributing nothing to society, so kill them. And if they're a drain on society, kill them even faster. You all done? You can go, it's okay. You can just go. And if they're a drain on society, then kill them even faster, said the Nazis. Right? So that was one of the weaknesses of this particular approach. Another approach people take is, well, you follow your conscience. Do what you feel is right. Really, in America, people tell their kids, follow your heart. Sometimes that can be the worst advice. Follow your heart can sometimes be the worst advice. A friend of mine says that a good car needs a strong engine and a reliable steering wheel. A good car needs a strong engine and a reliable steering wheel.
Mhm.
If you have to choose one of the two,
Ooh, steering wheel.
which would you choose?
Steering wheel.
And a good break.
Huh?
And a
Steering
good
And
wheel.
the brakes, I guess. But if you have to choose one of the two, would you choose a reliable steering wheel or a powerful engine? You choose the reliable steering wheel, right? The powerful engine can get you into a lot of trouble if it's not steering you in the right direction. So we have to,
It's a bad
so
feeling.
following your conscience,
Mhm.
but now conscience can be rational as well, but follow just the way you feel. Conscience is a problem because there's all kinds of self-justification that can happen, right? So it's a very interesting topic. JLR in the book, by the way, I just want to point out, they have an exercise over there where they ask people about humans and dogs. And I didn't want to get into humans and dogs. I just didn't feel like dealing with this today. But it's really not theirs. And they don't say it properly. There was a study done by some newspaper somewhere where they asked people if you saw your dog drowning or a person drowning, who would
Oh,
you
so
say?
you did not ask me that question.
And exactly, that's why we're not even going there. But it's there, and you can decide how you want to handle it yourself. But ultimately, Judaism teaches you've got to go with. Judaism says you can't just follow your own conscience
Yeah.
because conscience can take you. It's hard. You need stronger guidelines than that. It's very subjective. If two people with
You have to save them both. You have to save them.
you have to say them. I'm with you, Elaine. You've got to say them both.
You have two arms. One
Save
for
them
the- one
both.
for the
Save
dog,
them
one for the
both.
person.
Exactly. Save them both. Exactly. Okay. So that's the capacity. The question. For innate issues, it's fine, but then there's learned content. And it's like, if you follow your own conscience, then there's not necessarily an objective right and wrong, only preference. It's all subjective, what you feel, and what you feel can't be the ultimate guideline of these things.
Right.
Another approach is to follow what society says is right or wrong. But you can't follow society because the Russians say one thing and the Germans say another, and the Chinese have other principles, and in the South they have one set of values, and up in the North they have another, and red states, blue states, green states. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book, right? No states. It's very good, Mr. Fancy Stock, don't you think? Thought of it myself. Okay. Whichever choice will avoid public outrage, that's not obviously going to be a thing. So
Yeah.
let's watch another video. I'm going off this for a second. And let's go to the additional lessons. 1 second for the class. What's it called again? Let's watch another video.
Rabbi, this is also a very modern struggle. We're struggling with it right now in our society.
It is. It's a very real struggle, and it's a
Right.
modern struggle, and it's a true struggle. And all these things are real, and there's wisdom in everything, but ultimately what we're saying over here today is that you've got to go with God and Torah is going to give, you see, here's the thing, if there are absolute answers, if there's an absolute God and he has absolute answers, and then you've got absolute truth, and then that really defines everything, and then it gives clarity. It obviously doesn't clarify everything, but it gives a lot of clarity. It creates its own set of problems, but that's a whole nother discussion. We'll discuss that in a second. My JLI dot, come on, my JLI.com/FAH. Boom. Let's go to lesson 2. And over here we have a video from, we're going to do, there's 3 different, there's a whole bunch of different essays over here from different rabbis saying more or less, some of them saying the same thing, some of them saying different, but I want to show this one. Rabbi Dr. Yitzchak Breidowitz. He's a smart guy, by the way. It's worth just looking out for him. Very intelligent man. And this is what he says on this topic.
So let me say at the outset that I fully concede that you can find atheists who are more upstanding people, and I don't think every atheist is going to be an evil person. But the question you have to ask is, if I am an atheist, on what basis do I behave morally? Dostoevsky, the great Russian novelist, writes or has one of his protagonists state, without God, all things are permitted. Meaning, if I don't believe there's a transcendental creator who gave me moral rules that I have to follow, then why should there be any basis for morality other than expediency and self-interest and selfishness? Now, it's true that Thomas Hobbes, the great British political theoretician, tried to develop a morality that was based on, without considering God, and ultimately he basically kind of created a social contract in which, well, it's better for me not to steal, kill, rob, because that way people will not do it to me. There was kind of a reciprocity here in which I agree to be moral and not hurt people in order that they don't hurt me. And that may work some of the people. And yet we do find that sometimes it's much more expedient to do the thing that's immoral. If I am a German in World War II, or a Pole, or a Ukrainian, why should I hide a Jew and risk my life if I can turn into a Jew and get some money? And yet we find that in every generation, there are human beings who are willing to sacrifice their lives and even the lives of their families in order to do a moral, good thing. The question is, without a God, where does that come from? I would submit that without God, people can often be moral and nice under ordinary conditions, but under extraordinary conditions, where expedience would support the doing of something immoral, there is literally no principle that would hold you in other than the idea that God gave you these laws that are inviolable. So, in terms of the actual question, can a person be moral without a religious system? The answer is up until a certain point. Beyond that point, quote Dostoevsky again, without God, all things will be.
Will be what? Permitted?
Outside,
Yeah,
all
permitted.
things will be permitted.
Oh, permitted.
Any questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, I kind of. have-
Yes, Rachel. Rachel has a comment.
Because I keep. It's hard to, a little hard to put into words, but. I think there are 2 sides. I think there are people who, let's say, for example, just feel inside that, and it's still beyond logic, but there are people who would feel, for instance, that murder is wrong without any logical explanation for it. Now, I think it's because they have this spiritual connection to something higher, whether they think they believe in God or not, or whether they really do believe in God or not. I think there is this spiritual connection that's really kind of deep inside of, and if people who are in touch with it, whether they call it God or not, You know what I mean?
That's
But
very
still
possible. So
do it
Rachel
even-
is saying that it's theoretically possible that somebody with a soul who's connected to God can intuit based on their soul what's right and wrong.
Right,
Is that what
even
you're saying?
without the idea,
Yes,
even
yes.
if they think they don't believe in a God or that there are these laws, you know.
I
And
agree.
I think that's equally I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing, you
I
know.
think it's possible. I think it's true. I think it is possible, and I think it happens. The flip side of it is there are also people that think that they know what's right and wrong, and they don't.
Absolutely, like
So-
people who are supporting terrorists, they don't even have to go back to Nazi
Exactly,
Germany.
that's true.
People who are supporting terrorism today, do they not have any conscience? Are they not listening to their conscience?
And they,
Or
it's
is their conscience telling them? You know, I don't understand
we
how,
live in a world
Yeah.
where the best students at the universities think that they are doing the right thing.
which is the same as
By
what happened in
supporting
Nazi
terrorists.
Germany. They
By
think
supporting
they-
terrorists,
Right,
right?
yeah.
We're living in a crazy world where the smartest and best students think that they are doing the right thing when they support terrorists.
Well, it means they're not so
Huh?
smart.
Yeah.
If you ask me, it means they're not
Well,
really
they're
so
really,
smart.
they're highly
They
intelligent,
have a kind of
highly
intelligence.
intelligent people. There's some loose screw somewhere along the system. So
Yeah.
with God, so it is possible. I think in theory it is possible that Rachel is right. That a person could intuit the right thing. It's possible also that a person could intuit something that they think is right, which is wrong. So the question is, how do you know one way or another for sure if it's right or wrong? So what we're saying over here is that ultimately the only way to know for sure is if God Almighty told you. The only way to know for sure is if God Almighty told you. So how do we get access to that? And the answer is the Torah. The Torah gives us that answer.
So you don't believe, Rabbi, that some people have that spiritual connection to a higher power that they don't call God, but
I think that everybody, all people have a spiritual connection to the higher power, which I call God.
right.
What they call it doesn't matter. I think all people have a soul, and therefore all people have
Exactly.
a connection to a higher power. I think that not all people, I think very, very, very few people function at that level all the time.
Well, we're human.
Exactly. Most
We have our
people,
limitations.
we have a godly soul. And we have a godly soul.
Right,
And
exactly.
therefore,
We struggle.
most people have to struggle with it. There are few natural saints, but they are very, very few.
Very few.
Very few. So most people need guidance to know what's right or what's wrong. I think that ultimately the only place where we can really get guidance is from the Torah, because God gave it to us. Everything else is subjective.
It's so few people study Torah.
That's why we have to learn more Torah and teach more Torah. That's why God Almighty gave us the Torah and told us to go out there and teach the whole world the most important principles. Learn it yourselves and teach it to the world. That's what it means to be a Jew, that we are the light unto the nations. And I want to add and
But
say
we've
we're
been
doing,
struggling with that for thousands of years.
And we're doing-
he
and I
had-
wanna
he's
say
doing a
again,
terrible job.
we're doing a great job.
We're doing a
We're
great
doing a
job.
great job, and humanity has come a long way.
True.
Humanity has come a long way. Are we perfect yet? Not yet. Messiah will come a little bit. When we get it all right, then Mashiach will be here. We're doing a great job. We're doing a great job. Today, the majority of people on earth know about one God.
True.
We've done it. Remember, in the beginning it was just Abraham. Now most people know about the one God. The majority of people in the world have rejected stealing, have rejected murder, have rejected all these principles that are so central to our message to the world. The majority of people. Now, are there people on the fringes that are crazy? Did we regress over the past 5 years a little bit? Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I have no idea. I'm not going to be the judge of all humanity. I'll let the one above be the judge of all humanity. But I've heard people say that things are a little worse now than they were 30 years ago. Maybe they're better, maybe they're worse. I have no idea. I'm not getting involved in that debate today. I can debate you on this one another day. But as a whole, on the whole, if you take the 3,000-year picture, we're doing a great job. We're doing a great job. Are there new threats? Yeah, there are new threats. But for the most part, I think we're doing a great job. We're going to keep teaching this message, because this is the core message, which is that to spread the idea that there's one God and not many gods, and we shouldn't worship any gods, and not to curse God as we spoke about last week. And today we're going to say the messages are don't murder, and recognize that our people are created in the image of God. We're going to talk about not to steal, even though the latest thing, you know what the latest thing is? My kid Moshe told me
Yes.
about this in Shabbos.
Micro looting.
How did you know, Rachel?
Because I read an article about it.
Moshe came
Oh
on,
my
he says, did you
God,
hear
it's
about this thing
sick.
about stealing? So macro
Stealing
looting,
and
is
murder.
everybody into this thing? You heard about this,
Macro-
Jerry?
What is it?
Jerry's probably a macro looter.
Micro-
I know Jerry's a macro looter, so wait, I'll show you.
People now who have decided.
I stole Peggy's heart.
Macro looting, look at this, macro, look at this, look at this.
Because they're not, it's
So-
not right that they're so rich.
Ladies and gentlemen, look here. So apparently it started like a couple of weeks ago, and we'll just start with this. But it started to get big mainstream attention
Micro
because- because macro looting, the New
Yeah.
York Times, God bless them, did a thing about the rich don't play by the rules, and also why should I? And they have this people,
Podcast, that the
and
New
they
York
did
Times
this.
posted.
Did you hear about it? Yes, so listen.
Right.
Meanwhile,
So going into the grocery store, I picked the thing I wanted, and then I would go.
People are getting small things from big corporations and they're feeling justified.
Like, look, everyone shoplifting from Whole Foods when you're shopping it.
So I'm not gonna spend the whole day on this, and you can
No.
spend as much time as you want checking out. You saw that, by the way, at home, right? You were able to see that?
Yeah,
Okay, so obviously, so Moshe basically says, what's wrong with these people? Don't they know about God and what's right and wrong? And the answer is they don't. So when it's based on what society, I mean, it's like, okay, so we need a Torah. So we're gonna come back, let's stay a little bit more. Societal norms are always shifting. Is this right? How many people will approve? You can't do morality based on polls. That's what politicians do. That's the problem with our society, right? Is the politicians don't believe in anything, and they decide what they believe in based on what the polls show, what's popular.
So they get elected. Right.
So in a way, it's good because the foundational principle in democracy is that the people will ultimately make the right decision. But for democracy to really work, we need a structure. We need to strengthen communities. We need to strengthen faith in those communities. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the good news really, there are about 500 communities around the world where tens of thousands of people are taking this class this week, okay, and going into their communities and talking about morality and talking about God and talking about this. And we're having an effect, and we're going to have a continued effect because all of us are God's ambassadors on earth. We're going to make you a business card. Really have to do this for everybody in the class. Elizabeth Libner, God's ambassador. Ambassador of God on earth. That's what you're here for. Okay? So when we walk around, we've got to remember who we are and who we represent. That's what we are. And we have to do this to bring more godliness and more goodness into the world. So if you go with logic, conscious of social norms, there's obviously problems, but ultimately what gives ethics its ultimate authority is God. And we're going to talk more about this in just a second, because I need to get the charger for my laptop and plug it in, or this is going to die. So we wouldn't want that to happen. I believe that the moral and ethical thing right now is to plug in the laptop. So excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. You see, on the spot. You think it's this, not that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's look in our books and read some text. This next text is a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I found in our books on 54, 55 in the English. The Ten Commandments bring together two foundations that at first glance seem worlds apart. Right? There's extremes in the Ten Commandments. The opening commandments, I am your God, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo yeh lecha elokim achedim, you shall have no other God, and so on. These commandments express and reveal the deepest truths of God's oneness, deep mystical concepts. The others, by contrast, deal with seemingly simple rules that do not murder and do not steal, principles that appear obvious even to ordinary human understanding. But the truth is that if moral laws, even those that seem self-evident, are left to human reasoning alone without their divine foundation and authority, human judgment, driven by self-interest, can twist them beyond recognition. And outright transgression can end up being rebranded as a mitzvah. Interpreting do not murder and do not steal from the standpoint of personal benefit, many nations and countless individuals have managed to justify their most horrific goals, not to mention excusing the means used to achieve them, as has been tragically demonstrated, especially in very recent times. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who was one of the most important rabbis in America in the 20th century, he was the head of the Yeshiva University, studied in Berlin at the same time as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he once told a story. He said that they were both students, they went to class together with Heidegger, the philosopher, the German philosopher. His class was considered the ultimate, he was considered the leading philosopher of Germany. And the two of them went to his class together. It's an interesting story because he said he saw the Rebbe was studying, he would bring a sefer, a Jewish book, into class with him, and would sit there reading his Jewish book during the lecture. And he went to the Rebbe afterwards, and he said, "Why are you learning during the lecture? You should be listening to class." So he said, the Rebbe just repeated to me everything that the teacher said. He was learning, but he was listening at the same time. He was doing two things at once. So Soloveitchik said, "Well, that's a good idea. I'm going to try it." And so he said, "I brought a book of Mishnah to class the next time to see if I could do it." And he said, "I wasn't able to do it. I either got too engrossed in the Mishnah or the lecture. I couldn't do both at the same time." So he just remarked that it was remarkable how the Lubavitcher Rebbe was able to do that. It's just interesting. I say this because it's interesting to know that these two greatest leaders of world Jewry sat in Heidegger's class, because Heidegger was one of those people, this great philosopher, was one of Hitler's professors. He's one of the people that became a Nazi and kicked all the Jews out and supported kicking out all the. And the Rebbe often spoke about the fact that he'd lived in Germany in the 90s. He watched Hitler's rise to power and saw how the greatest universities of Europe could become just the most immoral place so quickly, and was fascinated. And therefore, I believe at an intrinsic distrust of human-based moral orders without God defining it, because he realized the dangers of moral relativism by seeing it firsthand in Nazi Germany. And it's interesting that Rachel points out that she's seeing the same thing going on in campuses in America at the moment. And there's a lot of it happening. And I think in the end, America is going to be okay. I think our institutions will hold out and everything will be good and nobody has to go crazy. And I believe that everything is going to be all right, especially because Elizabeth is taking this class. And as long as, and that will keep us, Elizabeth will make sure that everybody keeps in order. That's what I think. Okay, that's my personal opinion on the subject. But the idea here is that it's not, so the Rebbe says like this important thing, that the 10 Commandments balances relationship with God as well as relationship with others. The same 10 Commandments that say, thou shalt not have other gods, says don't murder, because without God, people are going to come to murder. People could come to murder. And I just want to, for example, one of the big debates of our time is the issue of assisted suicide. And The Torah says it's wrong, but life is valuable, life is inherently valuable. And if you're gonna work clearly on utilitarian basis, people can come up with all kinds of arguments. But obviously Judaism gives us a different perspective. So let's learn more about it.
Where does war come in when there's a need, like against, let's say, no?
So war. The question is war. Today there's a whole debate about war. Is war so it's not a new topic.
No.
Mahatma Gandhi condemned the Allied forces during the Second World War.
Right.
He said they should be pacifist. It's a nice idea in theory, but many more Jews would have been killed.
Right,
Okay, we wouldn't be here today.
but isn't that
So in the
logic?
face of evil, you can't have pacifism. There's a concept in Judaism that war is until Mashiach comes, war will be necessary. Now, when to fight a war and how to fight a war, there's obviously ethics regards to war. But war in itself is sometimes a necessary thing.
So murder is okay under.
Murder is never okay.
But in war.
Murder is never.
War is
wait.
murder.
Murder is never okay.
But
Killing is sometimes okay. Murder is never okay. So we have a definition for murder. So for example, killing in self-defense is a mitzvah. Killing in self-defense but killing in self-defense is not murder. Murder is something else. Murder is deliberately killing an innocent person. Killing in self-defense is not murder.
Dropping an atomic bomb is.
Okay, now we're getting into the ethics of war. We'll deal with the ethics of war another day. I'm not here to talk about every act, but it's important to remember, killing in self-defense is a mitzvah. Murder is a prohibition.
Right.
But you don't think, you don't think assisted suicide is like different from outright murder?
I don't want to say that any two things are the same, but if you believe in the inherent value of life, which Judaism teaches about the inherent value of life.
There is suffering.
Judaism teaches about the inherent value of life, even when people are suffering. That a life is valuable even if the person is suffering, because you're created in the image of God. Okay? And a Torah that teaches that you believe in the inherent value of life, because there's two things over here. There's the issue of the slippery slope.
Yeah.
In other words, there's the issue of the slippery slope. Where does it end and where does it begin? Right? How do you define it? If you don't have absolute guidelines, then you have no guidelines. And ultimately, Judaism teaches that all the guidelines come from Hashem. So we're going to get into lots of controversial issues over here as a result of this.
But killing in self-defense is okay.
Killing not in self-defense is not okay. Killing in self-defense is a mitzvah. Is a mitzvah.
But if you've suffered and you choose to die instead of continuing to suffer, it's not a mitzvah.
Okay, let me ask you the question. Where are the guidelines coming from? How are we going to answer the question?
Right.
What are the rules of engagement and making decisions? Are we going to make the decision based on what are the guidelines? What rules are we using to making the decision? So I don't want to debate every issue here. There's no end to the amount of issues we could debate.
Right.
There's no end to the amount of issues we're going to debate. But if we're going to make decisions on based on how we feel about things, we're going to have a problem. If we're going to have decisions based on what seems logical, we're going to end up with problems. And it might be that you could do these decisions, right? But society is
But did Torah say that killing in self-defense is okay? Did Torah say that?
Yeah, Torah says that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Torah itself,
Torah itself says it, yeah.
not the Talmud, not the.
Torah says it. And even if it's in the Talmud, that's Torah. And if you want, we can do a class about that as well, but we're not here to do that today. But Torah gives very, very, very clear guidelines on all these issues, yeah. And it's not only okay to kill in self-defense, it's a mitzvah to kill in self-defense.
Yeah.
Yes, Jerry?
I think this comes about because of a mistranslation of the Ten Commandments. Generally, Christian translate it as "thou shalt not kill." It really is "thou shalt not murder," and so that distinction gets lost because of bad translations.
Well, there you go. Okay, very interesting. Now, let's talk about theft. Okay, if you go only with based on what society does, then everyone does it is not a good moral guideline. What difference will it make is also not a good moral guideline. The ultimate moral guideline is, what does God say about it? Now, the truth is, it's not so hard to do this, because the good news is, we all believe in God. Most people in the world believe in God today. Most people in the world believe that God gave the Torah. We believe God gave the Torah. So it's now a question of interpreting Torah. So we're going to go and read the Torah and interpret. So it requires study. But the good news is, God didn't leave us to figure this all out on ourselves on earth. He actually gave us the Torah. It's an amazing thing. The God who created the world told us what's right and what's wrong, and we need to do that. Now, and this is about the big moral things in life. It's also about the small choices that we have to make in our lives as well, which are sometimes bigger than the big things, as we know. Okay, so let's talk about stealing for a second. I showed you about macro looting, right? So now people have decided that macro looting is a good way of protesting against the issues in society. It's crazy, because what the issue is, but where does it come from? It comes from a place that people don't know. People don't know what's right and what's wrong. And right and wrong has to come from God. If you're going to have, otherwise everything's debatable. Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing. When I first started teaching 20-something years ago, I noticed an expression that Americans use that I never heard, like growing up in South Africa and in yeshiva, that you'd ask people a question and people would say, well, to me that means, and I thought it's so interesting how everybody has like their own personal opinion on everything. And there was no, and which is good. We live in a great society where we empower people to have opinion, but at the same time, we have to also understand not everything is up to you, huh? Because there's a God and he gave us a Torah. And so this comes out, we speak about macro looting. There's some interesting things here about stealing in Torah, which may not be so intuitively right, but it's, so this is Jewish law with regards to stealing, the laws of robbery, page 57 in our books. Very interesting laws of robbery. It is forbidden to rob or steal anything at all, according to Torah law, whether from a Jew or from a non-Jew, whether from an adult or a minor. This applies even if the non-Jew caused pain to the Jew. You still can't steal their things. It could be an anti-Semite, you still can't steal from them. Even though an amount less than a pruta, a tiny coin of minimal value, the smallest unit that Jewish law treats as legally significant money. You can't even steal a penny. It's not classified as monetary property and would not obligate formal repayment. Taking even that amount is still prohibited from the outset. They say the city of stone was destroyed because everybody stole less than a pruta. I remember once talking with people, a question came up, what's worse, to steal $1 million or to steal $1? What's worse, to steal $1 million or $1?
Oh.
So I think it's worse to steal $1. Because who's stealing $1 million? Obviously, you're not going to steal $1 million. But a dollar, taking something that doesn't belong to you, a pen, a tissue, you have to, it's not yours, don't take it unless you ask. Unless you're allowed to take it. You know what I mean? But stealing, if we don't realize that you can't steal $1, then people will steal $1 million. So nothing, we don't steal anything. Even the tiniest and minute amount is forbidden.
Shoplifting.
Now listen to this. Even someone whose life is in danger and who needs to take another person's property in order to save themselves from death, and you're allowed to do anything to save yourself from death, right? May only take it with the intent to repay. If you're stealing potatoes because you can't afford, you can't eat without, you won't live without it, you might have to. It's a mitzvah in that case to save your life. But you have to pay, one day you have to pay it back. Although all prohibitions in the Torah are set aside in the case of life-threatening danger, except for idolatry, forbidden sexual relations, and murder, it is forbidden to save oneself with another person's money with the intention of being exempt from payment. Rather, it must be taken with the intent to repay when one is able, since repayment is possible. Even taking with intent to repay is only permitted in the face of life-threatening danger, but where there is no such danger, it is forbidden even with intent to repay with something better than that was taken, what was taken. This includes taking for the medical treatment of an illness that is not life-threatening, or to save oneself from an oppressor who is causing physical suffering that is not life-threatening. It's got to be literally life-threatening for a person to justify stealing. And even then you have to have the intent to repay. It is even forbidden to steal on condition of paying double compensation. Certainly macro looting is forbidden. Okay, there's more examples needed on page 59. I'm not going to spend. Let's go from stealing. So victimless, even victimless theft. Today there's this thing, well, there was no victim in the theft. Victimless theft will not be allowed in Torah law. The line that logic can't draw, what I own, has been, okay, so the mystical belief, I'm going to skip that. So people say, oh, it's just pocket change, they wronged me first, I'll pay it back, I'll repay it. So we better, none of these things are allowed. It's not laws, we don't take to the little boy. What did he want to do? He wanted to
Steal a cookie.
He wanted to steal a cookie?
No,
Why did his mommy to give him a cookie?
Yeah, he didn't want to steal it.
Why did his mother give him the
Yeah.
cookie? What was wrong with giving him the cookie? What was the argument? Somebody
Somebody
else
else.
won't have?
Somebody else won't have it.
So share it. Bake more cookies, lady. Go to the store. You got a nice house. Go get more cookies. Okay. Murder. By the way, today, in general, in just society, in Western societies, where murder is less prevalent than a percentage than it was in other places. Murder was more common in barbaric societies than it is in religious societies, because we believe in God and value of life and all these things. But if you measure people based on their output and their productivity for society, like the Nazis did, so then you justify killing. But Judaism that says that people have inherent value, obviously we're not going to justify murder. So let's look in the books on page 60, ladies and gentlemen, page 60. And one of the most important principles in Judaism is this idea that God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created the human being, male and female, who created them. The Talmud, which really the Sifra, the Midrash, tells us a fascinating debate between two of the greatest sages. What is the greatest principle of the whole Torah? If you had to sum up Judaism in one verse, or which verse represents the essence of Judaism more than any other? And the most famous answer to that question was Rabbi Akiva. He said, similar to what Hillel said, Rabbi Akiva taught that you shall love your fellow as yourself is a great principle of Torah. Love your fellow as yourself. Ben Azai argued. Ben Azai responded, the verse that says, this is the story of the descendants of Adam. On the day God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. This is an even greater principle. Rabbi Akiva said, love your fellow as you love yourself is the greatest principle. Ben Azai said, the even greater principle is man is created in the image of God. Let's explore the ramifications of the two of them. But the answer ultimately is they're both right. They're two important perspectives on this issue, and they're both talking to different things. And they both will make a very good case for what they say. See, look at the table on page 62, figure 2.3. If you go with the principle, love your fellow as yourself, this is a command. It tells the person what to do, love people. And Hillel said, don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. It's a similar principle, which is right, treat people well. What it emphasizes is moral action based on comparison. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Unfortunately, though, the scope of this is potentially limited, because this applies most naturally to one's fellow, someone within the group. Treat your fellow as some. It doesn't talk about the universal dignity of man. But Ben Azai, you said that man is created in the image of God. He's going deeper. He's not focusing on action. He's focusing on an essential principle. Akiva is focusing on action. Love your fellow as you love yourself. Otherwise, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. So he's focusing on how to behave. Then Azai is talking about the theoretical underpinnings of this thing.
Essence.
The essence of the issue is that man is created in the image of God. By the way, the verse with Rabbi Akiva, it says, love your fellow as you love yourself. The next two words are, Ani Hashem, I am God. And Chassidus explains that the idea is to recognize the humanity, the divinity within yourself. And if you can see the divinity within yourself, then you'll see the divinity in the other. So they're not really arguing. They're just asking which verse sums it up the most.
Right.
In other words, Rabbi Akiva is looking at the action element of it, the societal benefits. And ultimately, it's a question of what motivates people more. Are you motivated more by societal impact, or are you motivated more by theoretical underpinnings? And then probably that explains the difference between the two of them. But in theory, but it's just different focuses on the same idea. Ben Azai focuses on the reason behind the command. It tells a person what a human being is. What it emphasizes is human identity. Every person carries the divine image. Universal. This applies to all humanity as descendants of Adam. We're not going to kill handicapped people if you believe this. It's not about output. It's the image of God. That's why Judaism values. That's why, by the way, it's another principle, but it's a principle in Judaism that suicide is forbidden. I mentioned that before. Suicide is forbidden because we don't own our. God runs the world. God sent our souls down. God decides when our souls go back up. And harming oneself is harming the image of God. And even when it's difficult, even when it's hard. Now, obviously people are going, we're not judging people per se for their hardships, not here to judge people when they're suffering, but there is a clear moral guidance and line in Judaism on what the right thing to do is and what the wrong thing to do is. Page 63. The Mishnah says, there's another ramification of this whole principle. Initially, a single human being was created. Why was man created alone, says the Talmud. It says it over here. Man was created alone, one human, just Adam, not Adam and Eve. Then God separated Adam and made Eve. Remember that? They made Eve out of Adam. Initially, a single human being was created to teach us that one who destroys a single life is considered to have destroyed the entire world. And one who sustains a single life is considered to have sustained or saved the entire world. Also, this maintains harmony among humanity. That first point, by the way, that's a very well-known passage. And you've heard that before, right? That if you save a life, it's like you saved the whole world. Everybody knows that. Listen to the next paragraph, because this isn't as well known. It's even more powerful, in my opinion, or just as much. Also, this maintains harmony among humanity, so that one person cannot say to another, my ancestor is greater than yours. And this tells us of God's greatness. For when a person mints many coins from the same mold, all the coins are alike. But God mints every person through the mold of the first human, and yet no two people are alike. He uses one mold, the image of God, and we all look different. How powerful is that mission? Therefore, every person must say, the world was created for me. Which means, with me value, with responsibility, I have something to contribute. Even in the hardest times, we have something to contribute. There's a beautiful letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that we found on page 64. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim, good morning. This is a letter from the Rebbe, page 64. Any questions or comments before I go on again? Any questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen?
Very important. What we're learning here.
Important stuff, right? Listen to this letter. I don't know who the Rebbe wrote this to. I would love to know. I'm going to find out. It says like this. I would like to add, the Rebbe wrote this letter about 5 months before he had his stroke, from which he eventually passed away. So it's one of the last letters we have from the Rebbe. I would like to add that last month, oh, it says it over here.
Yeah. Mr.
Oh, it's so interesting. So there's a picture. It says, Mr. Arkadiusz Rybicki, President of the Council of Polish-Jewish Relations, Office of the President of the Republic of Poland, Warsaw. Okay, so the Rebbe is writing this to the newly formed Republic of Warsaw right after, remember, we've just gone through the split up of the Soviet Union.
What year was this?
1990.
Oh,
I'm going to read the whole letter over here. I'm going to read the whole letter from the small thing. No, it's not the same letter.
no, it's not.
Oh, no, but it's the same letter.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it from the small print.
Yeah.
The second last paragraph is about over here. I'm going to read the whole thing. Dear Mr. Rybicki, this is to acknowledge receipt of your letter in which you express deep sorrow about the terrible anti-Semitic incident that took place last month in front of the synagogue in Warsaw, that the perpetrators were captured and will be prosecuted, and that the behavior was condemned by President Walisa, etc. You also express the hope that in the future intolerance and prejudice will disappear from the Polish people and that you are working towards this end. We appreciate the sentiments expressed in your letter, and we pray that your hope and efforts will materialize very soon indeed. Apropos of the above, and now the rest of it is in the big type. Apropos of the above, I would like to add that last month, at the beginning of Tishrei, we ushered in the current Jewish New Year 5752, with the celebration of Rosh Hashanah, the anniversary of the creation of the first man, Adam. Our sages of the Talmud explain why the creation of man differed from the creation of other living species, and why, among other things, man was created as a single individual, unlike other living creatures created in pairs. One of the reasons our sages declare is that it was God's design that the human race, all humans everywhere and at all times, should know that each and all descend from the one and the same single progenitor, fully developed human being created in the image of God, so that no human could claim superior ancestral origin. Hence, they would also find it easier to cultivate a real feeling of kinship in all interhuman relationships. Very powerful. Indeed, although Rosh Hashanah is a Jewish festival, our prayers for a happy new year include also all the nations and dwellers on earth. And true happiness includes everyone's peace and prosperity, both materially and spiritually, with prayerful wishes and a Rebbe signature. Well, isn't that interesting?
But even if the
In
man,
other words, you can't believe in one God and that we're all created in the image of God and be a racist, says the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's pretty powerful. Yes, Rachel.
well, no, I just noticed, I was gonna say, even if the man and woman were created as man and woman instead of, if we would still have the same ancestors.
That's true. That's true. But there's two parts to it. So the one part is that if you save a life, it's like you save the whole world. And the other part is that we all go back to the same person. Okay. So why did God create humanity with a single human being? If you save a life, it's like you save the world. Also, so you can't turn around and say, well, as a man is a woman. You can't get, because men and women all originate in Adam. You can't say men are better or worse than women. We all come back to, women also come from Adam. We all go back to Adam. All this Eve blaming. Eve comes from Adam also. There's been a lot of Eve blaming. You've heard of that?
Eve blaming?
Eve blaming.
Yes.
I've heard of Lilith blaming.
Well, there's been a lot of Eve blaming.
Yeah.
People say Eve got Adam to eat the fruit.
Oh,
That's
right.
what it is,
Yes.
right? Well, Eve comes from Adam. We all go back to Adam.
Otherwise, we'd be in paradise.
Exactly. We are unique and irreplaceable. And also, there's another point, by placing I am the Lord your God next to the importance of human life, do not murder, is associating the two. That again, it's the same idea that man is created in the image of God. This idea that man is created in the image of God is one of the most important things. And knowing this, by the way, helps us with certain ethical dilemmas. This can be the guideline in certain ethical dilemmas, like the famous ethical dilemma of the trolley problem. Remember the trolley problem, everybody? We're going to show a video about the trolley problem. This is just from the BBC. It's a famous ethical dilemma that was posed. And the answer, we're going to say already now, we'll give you the answer in advance. The answer is, in order to really answer these questions, we've got to remember man is created in the image of God, and that will give us the right way of answering it. The video that we're watching over here may not have the right way to answer it, because the right way to answer comes from remembering the image of God and the Torah laws. That's the right way to answer this question. I don't know what they're going to do in this video, but they're not necessarily going to have the right answer. But let's watch it and see.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that big track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. His great bulk would stop the train, but he'd die. Should you do that? Most people say no. But why not? Both thought experiments are cases of sacrificing 1 to save 5. What the trolley problem examines is whether moral decisions are simply about outcomes or about the manner in which you achieve them. Some utilitarians argue that the two cases are not importantly different from each other. Both have similar consequences, and consequences are all that really matter. In each case, 1 person dies and 5 are saved. The best option in each harrowing situation. But lots of people say they would switch the points, but they wouldn't push the man off the bridge. Are they simply inconsistent, or are they onto something?
Okay, so the point of it being, we're not here to do a class on this issue per se today. What is this video? Oh, this is the macro looting. This woman looks like a macro looter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's push her off the bridge.
We're not pushing anyone off bridges today, Elaine. where's our chair? Where's our
I don't think she would stop the train, she's not big enough. She's too thin.
Elaine? Stop. Okay. So the point being that you see, we don't look at things as math.
Mm.
Torah teaches us not to look at it as a matter of math. Every life is infinite value.
Mm.
A million times, 1 times infinity is infinity, and a million times infinity is infinity. So we don't play numbers games. We look at all lives of having infinite value, and the question is how to do the right thing and how to behave. And so understanding human dignity and remember that we're created in the image of God will give us these types of things. And of course, this is humans which are infinitely higher than animals. But understanding that God runs the world, so I'll give you an interesting question. I'll tell you a very, very interesting thing this brings us to our next section, which is about not eating meat torn from a living animal, which is cruelty to animals. That's the point. Imagine you chop off a pound of its flesh and then eat it before you even kill the animal.
Oh my God.
Yesterday at the Lag BaOmer barbecue, somebody told me about a worm that is affecting livestock somewhere called the screwworm. Have you heard about this? I was going to start Googling it, but let's leave it. There's something called a screwworm. And they breed, and if the screwworm gets into the livestock, they kill all the livestock. So, God bless them, scientists have found a way to take screwworms, breed them in a laboratory with some kind of mutations. You unleash you drop a few of the treated screwworms onto a swarm of screwworms, and those screwworms will kill all the other screwworms. Okay, this is what they're doing nowadays to save cattle from screwworms. So the gentleman asked me if we could kill all the screwworms in the world, would that be the right thing to do, or would that be the wrong thing to do? So we were discussing. I said, firstly, I don't know enough about the screwworms. But there's a law of unintended consequences that you might eliminate all the screwworms and land up with an even bigger problem. Right? So maybe we've got to find out are they actually contributing something. But I said more than that.
Every species contributes something.
The Mishnah says, "Lo bara hakadosh baruch hu davar levatal." God doesn't create a single thing in the world with no purpose. And even if we don't know the purpose, everything ultimately has a purpose. So from this perspective, wow, obviously humans are created in the image of God. Everything in this world is created with purpose. And there's a fascinating discussion in, a lot of people don't know this. For the first 1,000 years, when man was created, they were prohibited from eating animals. Did you know this? Mm-hmm. That for the first 1,000 years, until Noah came out of the ark, humans were not allowed to eat animals. Eating animals was only permitted after the flood.
Well, how did they know before the Torah was?
God told Adam.
Oh, God, okay.
I mean, people weren't necessarily observant. I don't know if they did or didn't eat animals. I think there were some hunters out there, maybe or maybe not. I don't know. We have to look it up and think. But the bottom line is, eating meat was forbidden. When man came out of the flood, after the flood, God said you could eat animals, but immediately came a prohibition, but you can't do cruelty to them. You got to kill them before you eat them, and which means all cruelty to animals is not allowed. Now, one of the great questions the philosophers ask is, what right do we have to eat animals? So there's a very interesting story over here in the books. Look at page.
Why do you think they changed it up?
Well, listen to this. I'll tell you an interesting thing. Page 72. Look at page 72. This is about cruelty to animals.
Because on the
Wait, one second. Look at page 72. So this is from Sefer Chinuch explaining the prohibition of not eating the limb of a living animal. And he says like this: not to eat a limb from a living animal. We are commanded not to eat a limb taken from a living creature, meaning a limb that was cut from the animal while it was still alive. One of the roots of this mitzvah is so that we not train ourselves in cruelty, which is an especially repulsive trait. In truth, there's no cruelty greater than cutting off a limb or flesh from a living animal while it is alive before you and eating it. This prohibition applies in all places and at all times to both males and females, and this is one of the 7 commandments that apply to all people of the world. Page 73, there's a story. A calf that was being led to slaughter, the story from the Talmud, a calf that was being led to slaughter broke away and hit its head in Rabbi Yehuda the prince's cloak, crying. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi said to it, go, this is what you were created for. You were created to be slaughtered and be a Shabbos meal. They said in heaven, since he did not show mercy to the calf, suffering should come upon him. He was right that maybe the purpose of the calf was to be elevated, but he wasn't kind and he wasn't compassionate, and so they said he has to suffer. The suffering went away as a result of the following episode. One day, the maidservant of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was sweeping the house. She was about to sweep away some young weasel. He said to her, leave them alone, for his mercy is upon all his works. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda had learned to be kind to animals. They said in heaven, since he has shown mercy, we shall show mercy to him as well. And he was now healed of his suffering. So not eating meat torn from a living animal, every one of God's creations has inherent value. It has value. And therefore we have to appreciate everything, and nothing is expendable. And the mystical teaching of how much meat we should eat, you know, in America we have an obesity crisis, and we have we all have a consumption crisis. We all have a consumption crisis because we're living in an age of plenty. And in the age of plenty, which is a big blessing, somebody asked me yesterday, if we looked at the world today, somebody asked me, do you think he heard someone say that we're living in messianic times, as you can see from the incredible luxury which we live in the world? And do I agree with that? I said, listen, luxury is an absolute blessing, but we have the responsibility of not being gross.
Wasn't the author, not the author Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe went back to Europe and said America is, everyone eats meat every day?
It wasn't one, it was a chassid, it should have mastered.
Somebody.
He spoke about America. It's such a gross country. People eat meat every day. Could you imagine? So it was a notion of consumptionism. My father-in-law always says that, you know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. So he always says invention is the mother of necessity. After it's invented, everybody thinks they need it. So the point is, right, that but it shouldn't be that way, and especially it's seriously problematic. You know, eating meat might have a place in Judaism. I know a guy who doesn't eat meat because of just the industrial complex involved in producing and what's going on. He just feels it's unacceptable what's happening. He's probably right. He's probably right. In other words, Judaism teaches us we can't be cruel to animals. We have to treat the animals humanely. It's a very important thing. So morality anchored in divinity will tell you about the worth of human life, and also that all creations have inherent value and that we have to treat everything in the world well. So,
Lesson 2.
Summary of today's
Is
class.
morality obvious? 1. The Torah teaches that morality must come from a source beyond human reason, emotion, or agreement. Without belief in God as the authority behind those, moral rules become unstable and can be reinterpreted or overwritten when convenient. 2. Logic, conscience, and social consensus can explain moral feelings or patterns of behavior, but they cannot establish why an action is objectively wrong. These approaches have a stable standard of moral judgment. 3. A God-based moral system introduces absolute property and ownership boundaries that cannot be negotiated with logic, emotion, need, or social benefit. The question is not, does this make sense, or will this help? But did God draw this line? True morality starts with human reasoning, but otherwise excuse crossing. 4. The prohibition against murder rests on the Torah's understanding of human value. Human worth is not granted by society or earned through ability, but given by God through the divine image, making every human life absolutely and equally valuable. 5. Murder is an offense against God himself, since it diminishes his presence in it. For this reason, it cannot be justified in numbers, benefit, or even claims of self-preservation. And this logic also extends to public humiliation, which the Talmud equates with stealing blood. 6. The Torah extends down beyond human life to all of creation, requiring compassion for animals, taking a clearer moral hierarchy.
Any questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen, before we call it a day?
I'll just make one little comment.
Yes, Rachel.
And I'll prelude it by the fact that I was a vegetarian for like 30 years, and that changed for a particular reason that I won't get into. It was a health reason, but I never really understood why it's any better to kill a plant than to kill an animal, honestly. If that's, a lot of people have that reason for not eating meat, to not kill something. But when we eat vegetables, we're killing plants. So to me, there's no big.
I hear that.
You know.
It's a very interesting perspective. I have a friend who talks about who's going to let all those cauliflowers out of their cages.
Okay, I'm with him. We should not eat anything at all.
But I hear what you're saying. It's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
It's just so hard to understand why today, 2026, we're struggling with these basic principles that we've known for centuries. And now we see, it felt like we were not struggling with those for so many years, and now we are. In so many ways. I mean, we've always struggled with it, but it's just extremely right now that somehow a godly principle has floated away.
It's a good point. It's an interesting thing. What happened? Why is it that we it's a very interesting point.
Kind of lost, right?
I think that we're living in a time of plenty, and there's a challenge of when things are so good. It brings new challenges into the world.
True.
We're living longer, we're eating more, how everything's just easier and bigger and healthier and better, and there's more prosperous than ever. And I think that's
So we've gotten more selfish.
It's a unique challenge of our time. There's a unique challenge of our time, and I think we're going to rise to I think we are rising to the occasion. And we'll do it, and we'll continue to get better and better. Right, Elizabeth?
I agree with that.
Amen. And I think the
So
media,
I like your optimism.
the
Thank you
media
for
has
that.
a lot to do with this.
Huh?
I believe
yeah.
the media has a
Yeah.
lot to do with
Yeah,
what.
but
Look, the
people
media
also-
created the mass media, and the way we have media now is a huge new challenge of our times.
Yes.
It's true.
Yeah.
But we will deal with it. We're going to overcome it. It's a new challenge,
Right,
but we'll get it right.
but we're more aware of many things because of the media.
So it's a blessing and a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a blessing and a challenge.
Yeah.
A lot of things that were swept under the rug are no longer
Right.
being swept under
That's
the
right.
rug.
Exactly.
And that's positive.
I mean, anti-Semitism has always been here, but now it's okay that
Everything has its challenges. Look, I also believe that in some ways, this is the last gasp of negativity before the coming of Mashiach. That's what I think. You're dealing with the last gasp of negativity before the coming of Mashiach. We'll overcome these challenges.
Just wake up.
And we will see Mashiach very soon.
Yeah. I
So
like that.
sometimes
Things have
you
to
know,
break down before they.
the opposing in a boxing match. Sometimes the opponent has to makes their biggest effort just before they defeat it,
True.
right? And that's what's happening.
I thought things had to get really bad before Mashiach.
Well, the bad is.
Well, they're getting pretty bad. That's what's happening.
The
We're
last
breaking
glass of
down.
negativity.
We're breaking
Last
down to
glass of
rebuild.
Negativity, we just have to overcome this and the overcome. Thank you very much, everybody,
Thank
for
you,
joining
Rabbi.
us. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon for good things. Have a wonderful, end the Zoom. I'm gonna end the Zoom.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you.